Thank you very much for tuning in to the Dallas Design Sprints podcast. My name is Robert Scrove. On today's show, we're featuring David Magdaleno. David and I have a conversation about design sprints and how they can complement an existing market strategy. He goes into how he leverages design sprints for his advisory business and how he'll be using them in 2019. I really hope you enjoy the show, and we'll talk to you soon. David, thank you very much for coming on the Dallas Design Sprints podcast. I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
Thank you very much for having me, Robert. Really appreciate you reaching out to me. It's really excited to speak with you today.
For those of you who might not know who you are, why don't you give a kind of an introduction to what you're about, maybe a little bit about your history, and kind of why we're talking today.
All right. Let's see. Well, where to begin? It feels like I've been on a constant journey of trying to learn, and I'm a kid that grew up in Southern California, and up until the time I was 17, had one view of the world, and I got an opportunity to pack up at a young age and come out east, and I ended up spending a couple of years in Vermont, getting to know New England, getting to meet some really nice people from different parts of the country and the world, and getting a chance to be exposed to a really forward-thinking school in an interesting part of our national history. It's like the early 90s to mid-90s, and so there was a lot of social change going on. Following that, I had gone to school thinking that I wanted to be an English major and a writer, and I kind of took the steps throughout my career to really foster that kind of learning and development and experience, and along the way fell in love with some of the other social sciences, if you will, and I picked up, started focusing on philosophy and economics, and by the end of it, long story short, I ended up graduating with a degree both in English and economics. And when it came time to get my first job right out of school, unfortunately or fortunately, I ended up choosing to come to New York and try my hand at some high finance here. And it was a real interesting time in the world. We had a couple of major economic events, and somehow by a stroke of luck and a family friend, I was able to get onto a bond trading desk down on Wall Street, and provide, my first role was basically providing finance support which was basically like all the back office support for a pretty big internal fund that managed JP Morgan's proprietary money. And they were investing the proceeds over time. And it was a large mortgage portfolio. And that was really the springboard, if you will, to me kind of being exposed to finance and to capital markets. I was part of a team. There were probably about 8 individuals at the time that were supporting the head of the desk, who was actually taking on all of the exposure. And looking back on it, I'm kind of glad that wasn't the case, because at the time, I think we were close to bumping up against about 30 billion in assets. Wow. And so each of us kind of had a different hat that we would wear. And they were all varying in age and education level. And it was really an interesting, to answer your question, I kind of, like I said, I lucked out in getting a chance to interview for the role and also be considered. And also whatever I ended up having to do, I looked at it as a real positive experience for me, both professionally as well as just from an overall education. Keep in mind that I've always been at a general curiosity and kind of try to put myself in a situation where I'm always trying to learn something new. So at that point in time, I think I was just about 21 years old. It was a really good experience.
Oh, I'd say for 21 years old, it would be a fantastic one.
Yeah. It was a really nice place to land for a couple of years, especially right out of school at a young, kind of an impressionable age. It was really, really fun place to be.
what was the next transition?
Well, the next transition for me was I actually went to take more, I kind of put myself on a trajectory away from the business. And what I mean by that is I decided that I didn't want to be a trader because I saw some pretty bad experiences during that late 90 time period. There was the Russia default, and I saw the way some of these people kind of wear their emotions on the sleeve. And I kind of initially identified that that was not the way I wanted to come into work each day and leave work each day. And but I loved, seeing some of these events play out and seeing the impact in the market and being able to quantify and how to work with the teams to reposition the assets or think about our liabilities that we had on the books. And it was really, really interesting for me. From there, I kind of just made peace with the fact that I was lucky to have a very strong manager who, to this day, is one of the top individuals over at one of the big financial service firms here. He's the head treasurer. He said to me, you can, if you do it right and you are smart and you're diligent, you don't need to be the person on the desk executing the trades. You could make a very good career for yourself, either in the operations or technology area, or even in the research department, and it could be very rewarding for you. So that kind of opened things up for me a little bit, and I started immediately interviewing internally at JP Morgan to see if I could start doing some FX research. And long story short, I got a really good opportunity to leave JP Morgan, and was the firm at the time, and go to a private investment bank out in Connecticut, where I spent a couple of years really honing in some of my understanding of technology and operational support for the capital markets. It was a good experience. It gave me a chance to really. It was a partnership. It was a private partnership, and as you would expect in those type of environments, the people on the ground have a lot more skin in the game, and that vibe definitely carried through the organization. So it's a really fun and interesting place to learn, and worked with some really great professionals there as well. I took that experience and kept building upon it. I got recruited by a financial service firm in California. At the time, one of the biggest loan originators in the U.S., to come out and be the controller for their broker-dealer. And I thought, heck, why not? I grew up in Southern California, and it's a chance for me to get back home for a couple of years. And at this time, I was in my late 20s, and I thought, heck, why not? I had a really, really great time. I moved out to the beach in Venice, and commuted to the valley each day to, working the New York hours to similarly provide support and enable the business.
How did that experience fit into things?
Yeah. So I kept building upon this domain expertise in the banking financial services area. And around 2002, I ended up coming back to New York from California after doing that similar type of work in banking and financial services, and taking on more of a finance business manager lead role. So I was the business finance manager for the commercial and investment bank, the residential business for Bank of America. And then I went on to be part of the management team for Goldman Sachs, also in the controller space. We had about a team of about 30 individuals that were providing support to the business. And for those of you that don't know, might be listening from elsewhere, around that time of 2006 to 2007, and even some might argue even earlier, like 2005, the market started to show some cracks, and really led to, for many of us, probably the most devastating financial downturn that we've experienced in our life. And took some time off. I lost my job at JP Morgan or I'm sorry, at Goldman Sachs in 2008. And I was just about to go overseas. I had been extended an offer for a top tier investment bank to do something similar in Asia. And some of the people that I had worked with previously at JP Morgan were starting up a boutique business consulting firm and said, hey, would you be interested in maybe coming on board as a senior member of the team and helping develop our practice and our platform? And at the time, I had dealt with consultants and advisors before in the past. I was usually a client. And it seemed like an interesting opportunity. They say sometimes that these experiences happen for a reason. And for me, losing my job when I thought at the time I was on the top of my game and working for a great company, a great organization, developing this business acumen for the past 10 years, I thought I was doing things, I was on a pretty decent trajectory. And this, I took a pause, I did some travel, and then ended up meeting in Iceland my future partner, love of my life. And right around the time when it's time to kind of make a decision on which way you're going to go, do I go to Asia and try to make something of this relationship, or do I stay in New York and, really take myself out of my comfort zone and try a hand at business consulting? I opted for business consulting. And that was really how I kind of pivoted and transitioned. Again, going back to your earlier question, Robert, it's almost like it kind of, I don't want to be sound ungrateful, but it kind of fell into my lap of sorts. And I was really lucky at the time.
Well, you really glommed onto it too as well. I mean, it's something that really appealed to you, given that it wasn't just a kind of a transition phase of like a year or 2 years, like some others might have it. You were basically working in this capacity as a business consultant for a little under 10 years. I mean, you really went into financial services organizations, finance transformation, IT consulting. I mean, I'm kind of reading it over, and there's just a ton of different topics that you covered as you went through business consulting. What was that experience like? I mean, what really appealed to you about it?
I've always, and I think it just kind of, it seems like on a yearly basis, I find new enthusiasm, and I really love working with people. And when you're a business consultant, one of the nice things, I've been very fortunate. I remember talking to Thurston from Neon Sprints a few weeks back in San Francisco about this. I've been very fortunate that when I get onto an engagement or I'm having a meeting with the client, generally speaking, they value my opinion and the feedback that I'm able to give to them. And I like that kind of dialogue, ongoing dialogue. And over time, I've been able to establish some pretty good individuals that I carry this ongoing dialogue with, people I've worked with in the past, either in the same role or maybe, like one of my better friends is my mentor from one of my earlier jobs. One of the guys that I started working with right out of school is one of my best friends as well. Some of the head of the businesses that I supported, I keep in regular contact, and we do things on a regular basis with. I've been very fortunate to be able to merge those two worlds together and find some like-minded people that like working with other people.
Hmm. So with your new company, Crystal Cove Consulting, that you've been doing this year, when we were talking offline, you're doing something interesting in that you're kind of utilizing design sprints as part of your advisory business and how that can complement a market strategy. Can you get into that a bit? Because I'd be really curious to hear you talk about how you kind of stumbled upon the process and how you made the connection in applying that process towards the kind of services you would do as a consultant.
Sure. So I'll start by telling how I came upon the process, and I'm going to make it sound worse than it actually happened. The events transpired, but I think it's kind of funny when you think about it in context of how where I was coming from, working for a firm, business consulting firm. You kind of get a call, and at the time I was I was going down from New York to Wilmington, Delaware. I had a client there that I was effectively functioning as the chief of staff. He was the chief technology officer for a large asset management, wealth management firm. And he calls me, my manager calls me and says, I need you to be in Buffalo, and this is like in the middle of the week, on Monday to lead some workshops, and there'll be a team with you. Oh, and by the way, there's this book called The Sprint Book by Jake Knapp, and I would love for you to see if you can conduct the workshop leveraging this methodology. So, there's 288 pages to it, I think was a version I had, or thereabout. And basically I kind of just plowed through it in a couple of days and made sure that we had all of our artifacts tight, and ran through a couple of dress rehearsals and got on a plane on Sunday with the team. And we went up there and conduct the workshop for one of the largest regional banks in the US for their shared services space, and had a real successful experience with it. And the nice thing is that the team, even the team that my internal team, as well as the client team, the vibe and the alignment that were evident was just a really nice experience. The first try they gave me, it sounds really horrible, but they gave us a short window. We didn't get the full 5 days. We actually did it in the span of 2 days. So you could imagine it took a lot of alignment. We had to make sure that we walked in there with a playbook. We knew when things needed to happen, the sequence, and we basically executed. And falling back on my traditional business consulting background, and also when I was on the client side, one of the things that I always was interested in anytime I have a conversation with somebody is give me a sense for what the deliverables will be, and when will they be delivered. And with this methodology, I was able very quickly, and the client and sponsor were able to evidence that. It felt like hourly, and most of that was a function of the way we structured the day. But it went very, very well, and it was, I think, the biggest value add that the whole process added to the client and the sponsor was the alignment, and the overall good feelings the whole team had about the experience. And we ended up going back and doing similar type of work on a couple of occasions with the same team. I can't get into too much of the details about what the team was trying to do or why they needed to do it on a couple of different focus pockets. But they were looking to find some efficiencies in how their business processes were, to support some pretty key functions within the shared services space.
So I'm extremely curious at this point. I have a ton of questions, but I got to try to land on one. Did those impressions and those activities, those design sprint activities you did with the client,
yeah,
did you find that was a jumping off point not only for follow-up work with them, but also to have kind of, what'd you say, horizontal conversations with people that they knew or other aspects of their business? Did you find it to be like a kind of a driver for additional inquiry into what you did? Or did you find that alignment that the client side had was also an alignment that you saw in terms of your business relationship with the client?
I saw it as both. It led to subsequent commercial opportunities for us. And it definitely, for this one client, the organization had aligned us and kind of put us together and said, Dave's going to come up there with the team and they're going to take care of things. And it really helped me gain some credibility with the client immediately, because they had earmarked time and they were participating in the workshops. So that was a real powerful tool for me. And my boss was taking input at the time, or my manager was taking input at the time, and judging our progress, as well as speaking with the client to collect feedback and almost from a real-time perspective to see how things were going, to potentially tell us to start poking in different areas or considering different areas. Mm-hmm. And I felt that whole exercise pretty compelling. And as far as a diving off point for me, it kind of opened my eyes to a different way of working, whether I was working within a larger organization or whether I was by myself, of what was possible and how I could work. And keeping in mind that deliverables, prioritization, and in this case, a prototype would be one of the deliverables that we would be providing to the client at the end of the engagement.
What kind of strengths and talents did this process bring to the forefront for you?
So quickly understand a business process, and then also be able to align resources and get everybody. I looked at it as a tool, and if you follow it, there are instances where things can kind of have you lead to difficult client discussions. But if it's done effectively and you have a very good moderator that is keeping people on track and you're working as a team, you have flexibility to adjust activities inside of 5 days or even outside if you need to, depending on resource availability. And either way, in a short period of time, the benefits and the deliverables are presented to the client, and validated in most instances very quickly. And that's a very good story to be able to tell people about. And I think for me also, not only with this client, I was able to fall back on my knowledge of business processes and kind of lead discussions and lead the team and teach the team, how things work, whether it was, with regard to a particular, you think of it like a decision tree, or how things would have worked in the real world based off my prior knowledge. There was that component of it. But we began talking immediately how we could leverage this methodology to different parts of our work outside of this client, and how it could be layered onto your traditional SDLC, for example. And in little pockets, it could be very effective in ensuring alignment and driving prioritization. I think that is for me at least, that's an undervalued or under-touted benefit of the methodology and the tool.
Have you written or shared anything in that space around your thoughts around how that could be done, whether it's the SDLC lifecycle or some other aspects that you've seen work with clients in the past? Have you promoted anything related to your business about your approach to those things?
I have. It's funny. So the diving off point, and I just want to circle back because I know you're familiar with some of the individuals that are best in class in the space right now. And they've basically gone all in, or maybe previously they had gone all into that being one of the core tenets of their go-to-market strategy. I haven't been there because I get called back frequently from my clients to help them with their strategy. So there's a couple of, banking and financial services keep asking me to help them, and also technology firms that support banking financial services have asked me to help them. And whether it's focusing on their initiation or upfront pre-planning or pre-analysis work, or whether it's like we are currently managing all these releases, we're very transparent when things are coming for this particular product or module. And, still, I wish there was a way for us to kind of tighten things up a little bit. And, what are some of the tools out there, or what could you recommend, or can we talk a little bit about some of your suggestions that you might have on things that could be added on to help push things along, complement our existing plan for delivery that we currently have validated with our clients, but maybe complementing it and teaching our team or working with our team to help us understand how we can layer on different tools and tricks to help gain alignment. I think there's a lot of appetite from what have been seeing in helping clients use the tool or apply it to different issues that they may have.
It's ripe for experimentation, because I've seen this with other companies and with other individuals, taking bits and pieces of the design sprint process and applying them for where they're contextually relevant. And not only with just the segment of execution, but also pre-planning, getting alignment before you even do any executable work, as well as the process of kind of exploring what happens after design sprint activities happen and how you integrate that to your point, how you educate them on what they need to understand about it, how they move it forward. What's really interesting about your example is that it sounds like you've basically taken what the design sprint process kind of not promotes, but what it offers, and integrating that into your client services business in a way that addresses the needs and the goals and the business outcomes of the clients that you're servicing. So you don't really put it out front as like, we do design sprints and this is what it's all about. You actually put your consulting up front, and then the methods or the process of how to get those things done is just baked into your engagement with the client.
Yep, that's absolutely correct. And that's why it's a nice, I see it as part of the advisory business right now, because, when you're running a small shop like we are currently running, and unfortunately, I haven't figured out the way to clone myself yet to give us a little bit more scale, the people that I'm coming into contact with right now and that want to have these conversations about their data strategy, where it is, or their finance strategy going forward, or their location strategy. I want to keep having those conversations with my friends and my clients, and they are very familiar, believe it or not. And if not, I'm explaining to them what a sprint is, a design sprint, and how people are doing it, and the benefit, how quickly things can be done. And for them, it's, they're like-minded in that they like the alignment and they like the tangible results in a short period of time. And it's, I feel really lucky to be able to have those conversations with my friends.
And if I can add to that, in that we both know Bill Alexi through the virtual design sprint event that we took part of. One of the approaches that he has that's interesting and that I've been kind of promoting as well is, instead of using some of the nomenclature that's native to the design sprint process, falling back on natural language. So instead of saying something like the 4-step process, or the sticky solution, or whatever it's called, I'm forgetting, but I should know it. He phrases it in terms of, okay, now we're going to explore the problem, now we're going to explore a solution, or words to that effect. And he does the same thing with the design sprint. He says, he basically says, we've got a way to basically get to a testable prototype with your customers in about a week, give or take the amount of time that you have. So he never kind of falls back on the wording and the labels native to the process. He just customizes it so it's part of his natural language conversations with clients. Interesting.
Yeah. One of the things that I also find, Bill, by the way, I'm thankful to you and to Lee for pairing us together on the work we did a few weeks back. Bill is, I've heard about Bill in the market for a while, and very successful, very professional, really wonderful designer. He was a real pleasure to work with. And for people that are listening that don't know of Bill, I encourage you to look him up. He's definitely, he's out there and he's doing some really great work in solving some really interesting client business issues. Definitely recommend that. I fall back on some of the old textbook lightning decision jams and some of the preliminary conversations I have with my clients, if they're willing to let me take them there. As just an example, if you sequence things a certain way, and like you're saying, you don't need to talk about the brand was developed in the book or the different version that somebody's coming up with, but you stay true to a lot of the core foundational pieces of what those the early forms of the methodology advocated and recommended and required you to use. I think there's a lot you could do for clients or even yourself. On a weekly basis, I fall back on a lightning decision jam for myself and Crystal Cove and how we view our go-to-market strategy. I try to be disciplined about that, and little things like that, and it allows me to practice so that when I'm talking to clients, about their finance strategy in 2019 and beyond, front to back, I can help them understand different tools that are out there, or how we might work together as a team to put a solid plan for execution in place.
Yeah, I've always found the LDJ to be perfect for small teams of 5 to 8 people, whether they're project teams or whole businesses, where if you have like the sailboat exercise at the very beginning, where it's open-ended and anybody can put some things in there that they're concerned about, it really exposes you to some of the gaps and blind spots that some people may have around things they're not paying attention to, but do affect the business overall. And the great thing about that is you come out with a task list that everyone can sign up for and have a responsibility for to work towards a solution that can be done within the month. I found that especially for the teams that I manage to be invaluable.
Yes.
Coming up in 2019, tell me a little bit about what you got in store for like the first and second quarters. I know that you're continuing work on some of the stuff we did in November with designing the workday and kind of having people prioritize their goals and in an enterprise environment. But can you kind of speak to what you have on tap and what you're looking forward to?
Yeah. Well, one of the things I'm definitely looking forward to, and I'm hoping that I get a nod from you, Robert, is a chance to participate again in April or whenever that happens in 2019. I really, this last iteration for me exposed me to certain tools as well as a way of working remotely, and going back to me thinking from my Crystal Cove perspective, and I'm thinking about efficiencies and how I work that might translate into more cost savings and just working smarter, because my clients also expect that of me. So I'm hoping that I get an opportunity to come back. I thought I was going to be able to slow things down going into the end of December, but it's probably a blessing as well that clients have really been interested in me helping them understand their strategy. I was just previously talking about finance strategy. There's a foreign investment bank here in New York that I've been in talks with about helping them kind of work through some of their pre-initiation work and planning around what their strategy looks like and their roadmap. And then also, and that's also from a data strategy as well. And then there's a few clients, smaller clients, that are asking me to help them think about the way they view their mission. Software, they're actually technology companies, software companies, their mission and how it's presented to banking and financial service clients from a product development perspective and product management perspective. So, and with that, I'm hoping, that's a lot of advisory work there. There's still the consulting back end and team. I'm really excited about some of the opportunities that should be kicking off in maybe by Q2 of next year, because that type of work is definitely more subject to seasonal trends. And so for, at least for the short term now, a lot of our clients in that space tend to, just because it's not really best practices to be releasing stuff at this point in the year. Banking and financial service clients my experience has been is that they're fairly conservative. So, they tend to shut things down a little bit early and just wait and take up, their plans in the first part of the year and start managing their backlog if they need to going forward. So really just, kind of seeing through some of these advisory engagements, and then helping the consulting team hopefully build off some of these positive experiences with the client, and maybe getting a chance to come back and put on a different hat and help them from an execution perspective.
Okay. And if we're talking again in 2019, December 2019, you and I get back on the horn and I ask you how the year went, what would, in your mind, would constitute a good year and what would constitute a great year?
At this point, Robert, I kind of, when I don't know if you've read Make Time, or you've, well, I think one of the things that's pretty compelling to me is when Jake is talking about like being at home And, he thought he was great by leaving the office at 6 or something. And long story short, he was still on his cell phone. With my two young ones, for me, if I can, continue to manage my life and my uh, professional career in a manner that enables me to spend as much quality time with my family, I think that would be a good and great year for me. And I think I've managed, falling back on some of the lessons I've learned or heard about from folks like Jason Fried, and like what needs to be done to run things. Like, we run a very lean shop. The space that we work out of in North Brooklyn, I would say that we're in very good control of our expenses and what it takes. Have a very, very mindful about what it takes to keep the lights on. I think if we can have a couple more positive conversations with clients and get a chance to help them move forward or think about things, and maybe have a couple of new conversations along the way outside of our banking and financial clients, I think that would be a good story.
And you were talking about your family. I have a 6-year-old son that I'm raising as well. And you have 2 kids, correct?
That's true. We have Axel is 5 and Robin is 16 months. Both
Wow.
boys. Yeah. So, and my wife, Soleil, she's a dietitian with a cardiology practice here in New York. And,
Interesting.
and she works part-time, seeing patients that are the doctors, the primary cardiologist patients on an outpatient basis. And so we're in it together, and we're just kind of, this is the one that I met in Iceland when I took the break before I became a business consultant. We've been on an interesting journey since we met. It's going on about 8 years. Yeah, it's in my head, my father was one of these individuals that I was definitely closer to my mom, who put her career in kind of, or didn't put her career on a path, but she definitely kind of put the primary focus on myself, and I have an older sister that's 11 years older than me, so she got to dedicate more of her focus to me, and I'm very thankful for that. And I just enjoyed, knowing that my mom was going to pick me up or drop me off at school and be there for me. And I could tell my oldest son is definitely appreciative every morning when we're riding the bus together, and he gets dropped off, or I have a chance to pick him up from soccer. And and I know my wife likes having me. Our offices are just a few, probably right around the corner from where we live in North Brooklyn.
Mm-hmm.
So I've, it's a real. I'm very lucky and thankful to be able to put these things, little hacks. I call them hacks. Little things in place so that I can maximize my time with my family.
Same here. I one of the things that I truly believe is that the investment that you make in the early years, like from the time they're born to about age 9 or 10, the amount of attention you give them and the amount of time that you dedicate towards being with them basically pays off when they're a teenager and other times, so that they basically remember the fact that you were there for them, that you basically spent the time with them. They'll reciprocate, or they'll just see you as a natural extension. Albeit they're probably going to, venture off and do their own thing when they become teenagers and want to kind of explore their own lives. But it's that foundation that matters the most. And I think that's probably what drove me to kind of be solid in that regard and continue to be so going forward, I think.
Yeah, I gave myself about, I'm thinking it's maybe about 10 to 14 years from this point going forward. That's in my head, then I'm like, well, then, maybe both boys will be too cool to hang out with their old dad. And, maybe then Soleil and I could start traveling a little bit more. I mean, just the other day we were talking about, we really do have to make it a point to spend more time in London and other places. So the bug is there, and that we're definitely thinking about that at some point in the future.
We're probably taking my son Alden to Europe this upcoming year in 2019. And part of the engagement is that we're going to ask him where we should go once we're there. We already have kind of a tentative plan, but if he's starting to get into maps a little bit, so we're going to show him a map of some of the places in Europe we're going and saying, okay, Alden, we got a couple of options. Where do you think we should choose? And kind of get him involved with the actual process of it. And, that should be a good time.
Oh yeah, it's amazing. I think for somebody that lives in the States, and you look at the state, your great state of Texas, how huge and vast it is, or I mentioned I'm from California, or even New York. For folks that haven't been overseas and seen not only the history but the close proximity to all those great countries in Europe, and how great you could hop on a beautiful, clean train and get the experience of a train station. It's just like they have in movies, or it's very romantic and really nice. Yeah.
Especially ones in Germany, like Munich and other places have these just huge train stations. They're just like they're like 10 or 20 years into the future. That's just really interesting.
Yeah.
So David, if people want to know more about you and what you do, and if they want to track what you're doing upcoming, where should they go on the web to find you?
So we have a webpage. It's www.crystalcove.co. And we do have a blog that we're updating. We try to do it on a monthly basis. There's a few posts out there, and we're doing that more frequently. And we'll start putting some video content out there. We're also out there on Twitter and LinkedIn and Facebook. And there'll probably be another foray into Instagram in 2019 as well, just to get some more content or links back to content on one of those sources. And I'm trying to convince Mr. Duncan to start doing something similar in the form of a podcast with me. When we were doing the exercise of the remote sprint, some of the resources and individuals for interviews that we were kicking around as potentials. Similar to what you're doing as far as providing a venue and a forum for individuals to talk about professional things that they've been working on, as well as their personal life. It's very powerful, and I really like the work that you're doing with this, Robert. And I was thinking that I would love to expose other people to some of the stories of some of these great people that we know, that I've come into contact with over my lifetime, as well as Lee, and just giving them a chance to tell a couple of minutes to tell their story to people.
Okay, David, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it, and hope you have a great weekend.
Yes, happy holidays, Robert, and thank you as well for your time, and have a nice one.
Thank you very much for tuning in and listening to the Dallas Design Sprints podcast. If you have a question or a comment for us, we'd love to hear from you. Just send an email to robert@dallasdesignsprints.com. You can also find us on your favorite social media channel, whether it's Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, and even Pinterest. Hope to see you next time, and thanks for listening.